Hello and welcome to the Futurist 3D video training series. My name is Jeff Christiana and this is video number 11B of the Skeinforge 47 video series on how to use fill. We'll be covering the grid in the infill. So under craft, fill, grid. Unfortunately, grid is not very well documented. The only item that is documented is a grid extra overlap, and it seems that doesn't make a whole lot of sense. So I'm just going to go ahead and skip over grid. There's no reason to make any changes to this. The infill width over thickness takes care of what this describes. So this is all kind of unclear, so we're just going to go ahead and skip that. We're going to go down to infill. Infill, begin rotation degrees. What this tells Skeinforge to do is to lay a 45-degree angle for your first couple layers. So what it's going to do is going to do a 45-degree angle, and it's going to do an infill. This is your layer 1, and then it's going to begin rotation repeat. So after the next layer, it's going to be 90 degrees, and we're going to be going the other direction. And then the next layer will turn again. We'll be going. So each one of these layers are going to be laid down crisscross from each other, and that creates a real solid base and very strong base. So that's what these do here. The infill pattern, what's happening here is that the line is like what you see in the first, second, third layers, but with a line, depending on your solid ratio, which is set to 20%, these lines will have spaces between them, just like these honeycombs. So the line is a very weak object, as you can see. Rectangular produces this pattern, and that is very strong. The hex is stronger and the circular is supposedly stronger, but these two take a lot longer to print, and I just don't see the benefit of using either one of these. The rectangular prints quickly, and it provides a strength that is needed for your parts, for your prints. So the infill perimeter overlap provides an overlap from your infill to your perimeter on your outer wall. So the lower the number, say you put a 0 here, the infill will barely touch the outer perimeter wall. So if you see that your infill is not touching your perimeter wall, you want to increase this number. You can increase this number to 0.7. I believe you can go farther, but the software, if you scroll up, will stop you at 0.7. I don't really see any effect going any higher. So 0.15 works very well. My parts print out with that infill in the outer perimeter wall, nice and solid. One note tip here is that if you do have a gap between your infill and your perimeter wall, let's say your infill comes up and it leaves a little gap, your next one comes up, leaves a gap, and basically you're left with a gap that doesn't touch, but everything else touches. But you got that area where it just doesn't quite, it just doesn't quite touch. So that very well could be your belts. So I would never, if you do have, this works very well, and we put it out when our printers are calibrated and sent, that infill is going to touch that perimeter wall. There should be no gaps. If you are seeing a gap, you need to tighten your X and your Y belts. If your X and your Y belts are loose and are having backlash, the head is going to come over, it's going to turn, and it's not going to turn in time because there's a lag in there, and it's going to leave this, and your circles are going to come out oblonged. So if your circles are oblonged and you have that gap, you need to tighten your X and Y. You don't want to tighten them too much. The way I test this is I disable the stepper motors. I grab, let's say, the X-axis belt, I grab the gear itself, not the belt. You don't want to touch the belt because that'll mess up your testing. So you want to turn that x-axis clockwise and counterclockwise and watch the head. Your print head should respond to the littlest movement of that gear. If you move that gear a millimeter and that head doesn't move because it's too loose, then your print is not going to come out the way it should. So you need to tighten that belt. You don't want to over tighten. You want to tighten just enough to where it responds to the littlest movement. And do the same thing with the wide. The bed, you've moved that gear, that bed should move as soon as you start turning that. It shouldn't be a fraction delay in moving that print head or that heated build platform. So that's the first place to look. And that'll make your circles nice and round. You'll have round holes. You'll have a totally solid infill to your outer perimeter wall. So that is something definitely to look into. So we're going to close this video, and I will see you in the next video, and we'll cover the rest of fill.